As we head into our third week, I'm now going to start taking us through the standards a little more closely as we examine how a skill continues to build and grow. And so I've gone back and I've pulled the kindergarten standards just for print concepts and phonological awareness as a starting point. Now, when we continue to think of continuums as a way to see a skill progress and help us kind of understand where skill is for what we're teaching, what comes after, what comes before, went back to pretty much the origin of what we begin doing with students. That's not to say all students come in prepared, but where our standard with understanding features of print begins. And so I've kind of worked out what I feel is a logical sequence, and I thought I would share. So when we go all the way back to just recognizing that spoken words are represented in a written language, we work with kids on their sounds. That's phonemic awareness. That's tied more to the speaking and listening. When we talk about print concepts, we're bringing in now the symbolic part. And so one of the first things that we do is we just need to help children understand that words they say and hear are represented with letters. And environmental print is a big one. If we tap into what kids tend to know and see, they tend to associate something in their environment, and then we can connect to what it says. This is a great starting point. When I taught first grade, I always started the year with a bulletin board that said I can read, and it always had examples of print in their environment, perhaps labels from food, just other things that they were readily recognizing. So that I could associate the spoken word with the symbolic language. And so that's where environmental print is just one way to help kids make those connections. And it's actually something that many parents help us with, whether they realize it or not. The next piece in the continuum as we move on to the concepts or features of print is just a progression. We follow words from left to right. We go from the top of the page to the bottom of the page, and we turn pages. Big books are great for this because teachers can model for a whole class with large print. And this is where we actually work on one-to-one correspondence, one word, and so on. Moving along the continuum, it makes sense to me that we work on having kids understand that words are separated by spaces in print. I know one such way I used to use was taking almost like a word window. And when we would look at a text, we could isolate single words so that we could begin to build that foundation and that understanding. Our font sort comes into play when we think about recognizing and naming all uppercase and lower letters of the alphabet. Again, that symbol representing a sound. And these are all the skills that were in the kindergarten standards here. But in order to understand where this progression goes on, I noticed that the standard in first grade takes it that next step. And then after first grade, there aren't any other standards that seem to go with this particular progression. But then this is where we get kids to start recognizing the distinguishing features in a sentence, noting where the capital letter starts and that we have ending punctuation. And a great activity for this is to take a text and take all of the words, cut them all out separately, scramble them up, and have students manipulate them to put them back together. So again, just taking a look at a standard and what we can do with it. So for our collaborative discussion, I definitely invite our teachers who are working with these standards to share resources that they have used. For those of you who are working with a different grade level, I encourage you to maybe do a search and see if you can find anything online that looks like it could be helpful in the area of phonological awareness or phonemic awareness. I'm going to share a resource that I created and used a couple years ago that works on blending and segmenting onsets and rhymes of single syllable spoken words. And it can be adapted in many ways. As we think about our standards for phonemic awareness, we start with kindergarten. That's kind of a basis or a foundation. And particularly as we get into blending and segmenting those onsets and rhymes of words, come up with some games that I've used before to just get kids working with concepts in different ways. And of course, they love games. So there's two sets of resources that you're welcome to access. One is a word party game, and the other is word family bingo. So I went through a phase where I was really into making game boards and printing them out. This particular resource is in 4 smaller pieces if you want to print it out yourself. But the idea is that it can be flexible. And when I used to use it, I actually would have Velcro to help me attach pieces. So I have an onset deck or cards that just have single consonants or blends. And so the idea is that either students can set this up themselves, or you can go through and decide what particular cards you might want students to focus on. So you build your game board, and then there's well over 40 rhymes. Now, in here is a collection of the short vowel, and then also there are some in here with long vowels, so you can sort out or pull what is needed. So the idea with the game, as originally intended, is to draw a card, check out the rhyme, and that's how many spaces to move forward. So if you're at start, you start S. Okay, sug. Well, obviously that's a nonsense word, but again, as we've kind of talked about nonsense words, getting kids to decode and blend in that way is good. So, nope, didn't make a word. So then the next player goes. Ob. Yob. Same idea. So the goal is actually to try to collect as many real words as possible, and so students can write those down as they're collecting them. So I always have playing pieces so that students can move around the board. Sometimes I would tell kids, okay, you're going to take 5 trips around the board. Might incorporate a little math. You're going to take, 3 plus 2 trips around the board. It just depends on the purpose. So this is one tool, again, to get to working with onsets and rhymes. Now, another resource that I have using these same word family cards is a bingo, because kids love bingo. And so in my bingo, I've just taken, again, single consonants or blends, and again with the pictures, so that if they're still working on making the connection between the sound and the symbol, they've got that. And so I have about 15 just different cards that can be printed and used, and then anything you decide to use for markers. And then using these cards, reading a rhyme or a word family, and then students are working through to think about whether they can make a word. So if I use ump, and I'm this student, I might think dump, I might think hump, I might think trump. Okay, I don't have any more on that I see right away. Same for this one. Dump again, lump, grump, as in grumpy. So, bingo and a word party. Just two ways to be working with these onsets and these rhymes.